Hello YouTube, how's it going? So The Last of Us TV show has ended the first season, and seeing that I'm a huge fan of the franchise. I played part 1 when it came out on the PlayStation 3, played the remastered on the PS4 and the remaster on the PS5. I got the platinum trophy for the PS3 and PS5 version, and I got the platinum trophy for part 2, including the grounded and permadeath trophy. So I have a lot of time invested into this franchise, and I was not really sure how they were going to handle the TV show adaptation, but they did such an extraordinary job for it. It definitely still follows the same principles and storyline as the games, but they have a lot more liberties to take, or they're a little more stressed for time. But in this version, it is still very much, think of it like a remake. Like, they still stick to the core principles of part 1, but they change it slightly. Now, the biggest change is how the cordyceps act. They are more like fungus than they are in the original games. Like, for example, they actually act like a network. For example, there are no more spores, likely because they have some pretty big actors in this show, the biggest one being Pedro Pascal. Bella Ramsey does a great job as Ellie. At first, I wasn't really sure, but she did a really good job. She really embodies who Ellie is. But now the spores are completely removed. Instead, they act more like a fungal network, meaning that the second anyone tramples on these types of fungal tendrils, all the infected know where they are, somehow like some sort of homing device, and they will charge that location. They also travel through these types of tunnel pits, where if the foundation is weak enough, think of it like the locusts from Gears of War, and they'll travel through these networks and just come from beneath the ground. Granted, the floor has to be weak enough. These are still, even though they have incredible levels of strength, basically they're pain inhibitors and everything that prevents us from hurting ourselves from our unlimited strength, because we do have a lot of strength that's kind of limited by our brain to prevent us from destroying ourselves. Here, they still can't break through asphalt. It still has to be weakened. But the infected are very much still a huge threat. They don't sugarcoat how deadly these creatures are. They are feasting on bodies. There's one scene where they have a child infected, which just brutalizes a full-grown human. They have the iconic bloater kill, which is absolutely amazing. Like, and when the infected get killed, you see all these chunks of human and fungus just going everywhere. Now, the action scenes, they range between good and bad. I know that seems like a very wide standard, but it's either good or it's bad. It's never in between. Like, some of the earlier action scenes are pretty poor, but it gets better over the course of the adventure. I would say the final episode with the final scene, they did that full rampage such a justice. They showcase how completely unhinged Joel will get when someone he loves is in danger. And they really replicated all the emotional weight and very difficult situations throughout the adventure to such an incredible degree. For example, David's scene where he's about to force himself on Ellie, it is one of the most disturbing and gut-wrenching scenes I've seen. Like, I had to turn away of how disturbing they made it. And they definitely take new changes, and they do it well enough. For example, with Bill. Bill, in this scene, they have an entire episode dedicated, or at least most of the episodes, dedicated to him finding love in the way of Frank, which I think is really well done. It's still, that's the biggest change they do have in this show. Frank and Bill's relationship is established as being more poetic than it is being tragic. In the original, Frank decides to leave because he can't live with Bill anymore. He's decided that he can't live in this town and just wait for death to come. He wants to live his life. And in this version, it's more that Frank comes in Bill's town, and he is the one who gives Bill hope to continue forward. And it's actually really well done. But at the same time, I don't know, it's kind of up in the air, because I really think what they did with the character was really well done, but I'm not really sure about ending their lives was the best way, because that's kind of how it goes. It's a Romeo and Juliet situation, but then again, you understand where Bill is coming from. Bill is basically, he hated people, he was a doomsday prepper, and he was glad that the apocalypse happened, essentially, but Frank gave him a reason to live, and he grew old with Frank. Frank eventually developed I believe it was some sort of cancer, but he eventually just decided, I've lived my life, I fell in love, I grew old, I have nothing else left. You are my everything. And I mean, I can see where they were coming from. One of the best changes, I would say, is, I mean, I wouldn't say it's the best change, but it's definitely a pretty good change, is the way they handled Henry and Sam. Like, in the original, Henry and Sam just wander into the hunter's trap and they're just trying to survive. This time, they kind of paint the hunters as not being these one-dimensional characters. They definitely have more impact on the story, whereas in the original, they're basically hinted to be the people from the military academy, the kids, who ended up just like going rogue and starting to kill people when there wasn't enough supplies in town to sustain themselves. They would lure people into town and hunt them in order to get their items. Whereas in this one, it's shown that the military were actually the military was also painted as the bad guys in the original, but in here they're really painted as the really bad guys. They also connected Ish and God, I can't remember, but Ish's community with the QE zone, because they have to rush through a lot of stuff and material, whereas the game is about 10 hours long. Here they really have to condense everything together, so Ish's community doesn't live outside in a sewer. He actually lives underneath the city as part of like the people who decide to leave the military QE zone and just go underground. Now, one of the biggest changes to the infected is the fact that they can actually come up from the ground. Now they can, because the fungal network is so vast, they can literally weaken the asphalt and the foundation for certain areas, and they'll come up when the thing is weak enough or enough noise is made, which I think is a brilliant idea. It's kind of like the Locust from Gears of War, but unlike the Locust who can crack through any type of foundation, here it has to be weak enough. They're still humans to an extent, and they can't pound through asphalt. They still need to like weaken the foundation before that happens. Of course, they do humanize a lot more characters in this. For example, the sniper that was originally in The Last of Us Part 1 where Joel had to rush and kill him. Now he's an old man who's just like keeping watch for the QE zone, and he tells him not to make a move. But of course he does, because what does he have to live for? This is his entire purpose. And if he lets them go, they'll kill him anyway, so it's a lose-lose for him. And they do that for a lot of the characters. It was unsuccessfully done with the leader of the hunter party. In this one, again, they try to humanize her and make her more justified in a way for what she's doing. In her eyes, she's the main. It's basically The Last of Us Part 2 philosophy. In her eyes, they're the bad guys because guess what? Henry and Sam were responsible for the death of her brother, who was a good guy, apparently, who kept the community together, kept the people together, and he was the key foundation for a lot of these people living now. But he helped kill him because his brother needed leukemia medication, and guess what? They weren't going to spare that, but he made a deal with someone. He basically said, kill this person, and we'll give you the supplies, the military leaders, because he was leading the vigilantes against the military, which I think was a cool idea, but it just wasn't executed well, because the final big scene where they have the bloater come out, which was really well done, the action scene is just so poorly choreographed. Like, the infected would charge only the hunters, and they would leave Henry and Sam alone, and Ellie, despite Ellie running everywhere and making as much noise as possible. I get it, she's the main character, plot armor, but a lot of the scenes, action scenes, tend to fall under that kind of poor loop until you get to the final scene in the final episode, which I'll keep as spoiler free as possible. But let's just say Joel kind of goes off the deep end in the most crazy, unhinged, but profound scenes you could possibly imagine. It doesn't have the same impact as the game did, but I think that's more or less because they couldn't really have Joel running away from a bunch of armed people with automatic weapons. Another thing is that I really think how they painted David was really well done. Like, David is incredibly dangerous in this. In this one, they actually went full circle and gave him back his religious angle. This was actually supposed to be in the original, but they cut it out, I guess, for time purposes, but they put it back into this, and they definitely showcase why David's the leader here. You see that only the most inner circle know about the whole cannibalism and how he's the one doing all of this. But you also see that none of the people want to take the leadership role because they know they can just pile it on David for making these decisions, while at the same time they understand that he is a deeply disturbed and unhinged person because he is a P word, and I can't say it on YouTube for reasons. But the show is very well constructed of how they showcase him in a much more demonic sense. Don't get me wrong, the original one where they showed him, he was pretty twisted, but in this one, the scene when he tries to force himself on Ellie is that more disturbing and just so, yeah. Bella Ramsey does an incredible job as Ellie. Like, she really nailed it. At first, I wasn't really sure if she would do it because, I don't know, she just didn't carry the spirit, I would say. But in this, I was completely proven wrong. She did an incredible job. So did Pedro Pascal. But let's face it, that guy's an incredible actor. So he was going to nail the role regardless. But he definitely really showcased Joel's best and worst aspects. The idea of him just being very distant and not really caring because he's just thinking about survival. He doesn't really give a damn about anything else. And then eventually becoming much more attached to Ellie and seeing her as his second chance at life, something to move on from. I would think the weakest casting would be Tommy, to a degree, because let's face it, in the original, Tommy didn't get a lot of screen time. He was kind of there for the sake of just the story, and he wasn't really given much to flesh out. But the scenes that he was in here kind of didn't really do the character that much justice. One of the biggest scenes that I felt like was very loose was when Tommy and Joel fight. They kind of moved that to the side because this time Tommy's having a kid, and Joel kind of just allows that to happen in the sense that he's like not trying to engage with Tommy in the same degree. But at the same time, that scene where they got into a fight and were about to basically punch each other was the scene where it was really shown that all this time he was kind of showcasing that Tommy was a pushover and a quitter, which is also highlighted in the TV show. But the second that he tried to, Joel tried to force himself onto Tommy to do something and use, what he knows best, being an enforcer, Tommy's like, if you try that again, it's not going to end well for you, showing that he has grown and he won't allow Joel to push him around because he has people to care about, his wife, his community. He has people that care about him, and he finally found somewhere where he belongs. But yeah, I mean, the scenes that really mattered, such as Sarah's death, the final scene, David, what else? Almost every significant scene that I can think of was done incredibly well. Riley and Ellie passing on. I would say that's the only thing that I was not very annoyed about, but a little bit annoyed about. I'm pretty sure they'll do that in season 2, where they show a flashback or something, because I feel like that was the biggest missed opportunity. The fact that you never see Riley die. Like, we all know that she died, and it's highly inferred that Ellie is the one who put her down. In the TV show, they confirmed she was the one who put Riley down, but they never show it, and I feel like that was a huge missed opportunity. They should have shown Ellie killing Riley by the end of the series, but they might be saving that for season 2 because the show has been doing exceptionally well. More and more viewers each episode, and it's well done. It's an incredible show, well choreographed, acted. Everything that I love about The Last of Us is here. Now, the biggest, I guess, thing is right now how they're going to set up part 2, because let's face it, part 2 is infamous within gaming in general. I wasn't a fan of part 2. I did platinum the game. I got all the trophies, but the writing is exceptionally poor in that game. You had to take major leaps in logic in order to justify most of the stuff that happened there. It had good ideas. It's just that the story was just really poorly written. Revenge bad. We're the center of our own stories. Abby was justified because it's just like what we're doing right now. It's very bare bones, emotional blackmail in a lot of ways, like just trying to bait the player, like Ellie killed the dog that you're going to eventually pet and grow attached to, stuff like that. Or Ellie killed Mel despite the fact the woman literally is wearing like a coat that hides her pregnant body, and like she never once tells Ellie like, hey, I'm pregnant, because It's just so much leaps in logic, or how Dina was able to travel across the country while being pregnant, while riding a horse, while fighting bandits and everything, or Dina like being in love with Ellie despite no one telling us why she loves Dina, or the fact of how Jesse is so cool with the fact that his best friend Ellie is dating his ex-girlfriend within days of them breaking up. Like, it's all that stuff, and they're kind of trying to build up to that for the next season, and they do it kind of well, because Dina's kind of shown in season 1, but the biggest thing is showing how Joel will eventually, what will happen with him. Let's face it, this thing is already spoilers. Like, the Last of Us Part 2 came out years ago. The game, basically, we know that Joel dies, and in this one, they really showcase why or how Joel has died. They took really the feedback from Part 2, and it's clear that Neil Druckmann and the writers of the show are taking notice to try and justify what's going to happen later on, such as Joel getting slower, Joel not being as tuned with his instincts because he's older now. He's not as fast, not as strong, not as subtle with everything. He kind of forgets things. He has panic attacks. So the idea of him like automatically starting to not, be aware of Abby's intent, despite it being painfully obvious with, her gear, the military vehicle, the hordes of people who are all like physically fine, and like literally like all the warning signs are there, and now it's kind of trying to lean up to that. Like, they have the foresight now, knowing how the games are going to progress, because I remember that, I can't remember where I read this, but basically The Last of Us 1 wasn't supposed to be 1. It was just supposed to be a complete experience, and that's it. And that's how a lot of people expected it to end before they confirmed The Last of Us Part 2, which ended up being the same story that Last of Us Part 1 was originally supposed to be about, which was about Joel going to the Fireflies with Ellie, and Tess hunting Joel down as they traveled through the country. Basically the same thing as what Abby did, only, how that went down. Either way, the TV show is exceptionally well done. It was so good I did pay for an HBO Max subscription. I mean, the thing has pretty good shows. I'm watching Adventure Time on it right now, brilliantly. That show is so good. Like, I'm right now getting through it. But either way, Last of Us, as a fan of the games, absolute banger. Really well done. Exceptional show. If I would have graded, I would have given it a 9 out of 10. Like, highest 9 out of 10 I can give it. The only reason I'm not giving it a perfect score is because a lot of the action scenes leading up to the final action scene, which is exceptionally done, are not that great. Like, you're definitely going to have that moments where you're like, this guy's an idiot, this person, what are you doing? Why are the infected avoiding the people who are clearly in front of them just to get the minor characters? Basically, the idea of, this person has plot armor, don't chase them. That person doesn't have plot armor, chase them. Or the Bloater kill, like, the Bloater was one of the best, coolest things, but at the same time, one of the biggest problem was the guy who got killed. Like, this was the lowest point of the series, I would say, when the guy was like, go, just get out of here. And then he charges the Bloater, like, just walks up to it with the gun, like, moving forward. I'm like, why would you move forward? You move back while you shoot, because that thing is literally bouncing bullets off like it's made of adamantine or something. But yeah, you do get to see the iconic kill where he rips the guy's face, but I feel it was just forced. Like, it was just forced, but everything else about the show was exceptionally well done. So tell me what you think about the series. I'd love to hear about people's opinions. Again, I'm a huge fan of the series, and I thought it was really well done, and it'll be interesting to see how they handle season 2. Whoever they get for Abby, I really would highly recommend if they would stay off social media, because you guarantee they're going to take a lot of shit for just being Abby, because let's face it, Laura Bailey literally got death threats just for voicing the character, because people can't separate reality from fiction. So I'm pretty sure, like, whoever they cast, it's just going to be a huge train wreck, even if they're perfect for the role. A lot of people did the same thing with Bella Ramsey for being Ellie, so you can guarantee they're going to do the same thing with whoever plays Abby. Same thing they did for Sarah. Like, I just get really annoyed by that stuff, because they're actors. No character is going to look one-to-one to a video game character. The whole point of being an actor is you take on the role of another human being and, you know, embody their skin in the words of in Tropic Thunder, basically. I can't remember what the director said exactly, but yeah, you're taking on the role of another character and you have to play that part. Either way, really good series, highly recommended. Tell me what you think, and I'll see you tomorrow when I'm playing more Dragon's Dogma if you're here for that. Either way, goodbye.